Welcome to Beware Spoilers. I am Adam. I have finished The Sandman on Netflix. It was a arduous journey to get through that entire fucking show, because they did that thing where they released it all at once. I can't stand the binge model. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Binge model sucks. Because the problem is, like, you can't really get into the show fully, because you're spending a full, week trying to get the entire thing, done. Because, the thing is, they spent so much time marketing this and all of that, and then for the show to come out on a Friday, and then, as if we have nothing better to do, sit in all weekend and get through the entire show, and have to move through the entire show in such a short period of time, if you're gonna, watch it all at once, which the show will, make you want to do that. And I think that, when you're doing the binge thing, it's people don't have time to sit and watch through 10 hours of TV in a weekend. I would say the vast majority of Americans, don't have that time over the course of 3 days to sit and watch the entire thing. I think that the model that we've seen more recently come back into vogue, be they with HBO Max, be it with Disney, be it with any number of other things, the weekly model, I think, serves series a lot better, because not only do you get a chance to be okay, one episode, then we'll build for a week, then another episode, build for a week, another episode, but it gives you longevity in terms of people being aware of the show, and it gives you awareness, and I feel like it's a better idea. And yeah, ratings suggest, based on ratings for Why the Last Man and other shows, ratings suggest that people will watch the first episode and then decide to not stop watching, but they'll do 3 and then they'll be alright, well, I'll watch the rest when the show ends, and then you get a bump after the show ends and they can watch the rest of it. But then that's, it's only watching 5 episodes, and again, Sandman is 10. That is a lot of that's 10 hours of TV, that each episode is an hour long. So all of that said, I watched Sandman. Now, there are some interesting changes between here and the comic, and I understand why all of them happen. Because if I remember correctly from the comic, the Corinthian is not mentioned until the arc with the Dream Vortex, the Doll's House. Until they get to that point, there is no mention of the Corinthian. But the Corinthian has an active role through the entire beginning of the show into there. And I feel like that's an interesting approach. I just think it muddies the water a little bit about the Corinthian and how the Corinthian escaped. Because, the idea that, the census is being taken, and and that's when it's from the Corinthians out, and the Corinthian escaped while he was in, while he was imprisoned in the glass cage in the basement for 100 years. That, in the way that, the girl with the sleeping sickness, Kincaid, is in the Doll's House and influencing that. I feel like it's a missed opportunity to put that in there proper and be and have that work. Favorite episode of the show, hands down, and I think that this stands to how I felt reading the comic too. I was not a particularly big fan of that second arc, The Doll's House. And keeping in mind, this comic, I think, began and ended its run before I was born, or I was born as it was wrapping up its run in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, and I ended up reading it later, and then listening to the audio adventure on Audible, and yeah, I think the Doll's House is my least favorite of the arcs. I feel like everything from like it's a very faithful recreation from head to toe of what this show, of what the comic was and what the intent of the comic was. There are some moments that are lightened, like I don't think 24/7 is particularly as gruesome as it was in the comic. I don't think that what was the other one? I don't think like the death of the infant in the episode about death is not watered down, but it is like they do a lot to not show as much of the impact of the people around them, and I think that for the death of the newborn especially, that goes a long way to not make the like it goes a long way. I would say, because that death always got me. Is the death of the newborn, and also I think not articulating what the newborn's saying also makes sense. It's an interesting kind of take. What was the other big change I wanted to address? The lack of DC characters, which Neil Gaiman actually addressed this. Why are there not more DC characters in this? And he said it wasn't a rights issue. I mean, John Constantine is now Joanna Constantine, and I don't care if Alan Moore pronounced it Constantine. I'm not pronouncing it Constantine. I don't give a fuck. It's dumb and it's wrong. Like, I don't think anyone ever pronounced the Roman Emperor as Emperor Constantine. I think it was like I would always call it Constantine. And every other DC thing, it's always Constantine. But Alan Moore pronounces it Constantine, and now everyone now they pronounce it Constantine here. And I don't subscribe to that. But aside from Lucifer Morningstar, played by I almost called her Random Tarth, but that's not her actual name. She was also in Star Wars, but and John Constantine, or Joanna Constantine in this, played by Olivia Colman, and she's just great in the role. Where it's like she just plays that, like, not dickish, but like I would say like smarter than everyone in the room. Like, and you know, it kind of reminds me of like how Clara was portrayed, or how to pronounce it, I'm not sure. But the way she was portrayed on that show is kind of the same thing. She is the smartest one in the room, and she knows she's the smartest one in the room, and she's not afraid to show that she's the smartest one. And I think that's kind of what we get in this show. It's kind of the same kind of paradigm where it's like, you know, she's a master of the occult. She knows exactly what she's doing. And it's a very well done, you know, like that episode's great too. And they do a great job with the fight between Lucifer and Dream. And I love that whole fight. Where they get bigger and bigger, it's very well done too. Patton Oswalt as the Raven is also really good. I also really enjoyed his performance in the show. I'm trying to think if there's anyone in the cast I didn't like in their role, and I don't think there's anyone I didn't like. But with the lack of DC characters, he explained it as. If you put in the DC characters, people will start questioning, is the Justice League going to show up? Who is going to show up from the Justice League? Is Superman going to show up? Which Batman is in this universe? And it's like, that's not the important thing here. The important thing is the adventures of Morpheus and the adventures of, the other Endless. And it's a valid point. It's one of the things that you end up muddying down the message and you end up muddying down your work if you're like, oh, so this is, this also has justice going on. Like the idea of, and I think that bringing in Scott Free and bringing in Batman and all of that, or Martian Manhunter in that one episode, it doesn't add anything, but it does distract, and it would take an entire episode to do that. I think that Scott Free has his appearance between Constantine and... It's either between Constantine and Lucifer, or Lucifer and John D. And I think that, look, you can... It's weird, because it's it's kind of like they don't want to reference the DC universe. It's like, John D is also Dr. Destiny, and the asylum he's in the comic is Arkham Asylum. And, again, it could also be that Vertigo was just launching in the 80s, and they were looking for something to tie to DC, DC proper, and being like, oh, and here is, major Justice League villain Dr. Destiny, and here is Scarecrow, the iconic Batman villain, and they're palling around in Arkham Asylum. I think that, doing that, I think cheapens the show as a whole, because as opposed, once you start introducing those fantastical elements, everything becomes a little bit different, especially when you're looking at it in live action. If we're going to look at this show for what it is, and then we start being like, and Batman's in this world, it's like, alright, whatever. There is one Silver Age, Golden Age, the Silver Age and or Golden Age, Sandman does appear on the show, and I do really appreciate that. That was a cool moment, and they did keep that in, which was nice. And that was during the Doll's House too. Boyd Holbrook's also great as the Corinthian, and David Thewelius is great as John D. That whole episode in the diner, and I think that's part of why this show would have worked in a weekly capacity, is that it does have a very anthological feel to it. If you're gonna watch this show, you can kind of pick up that this show is each episode is kind of, there is a story, there's an overarching story. So I think that, everything the show does, I do understand the rationale why. That said, I'm also not... What's I'm looking for here? I understand the thought process behind putting the Corinthian through the entire show. I guess they get muddies the waters in the beginning a little bit. I think that would be my only complaint about the show, is that by moving the Corinthian to... And even so, it's it's really only the fact that we see him before he escapes. Before he escapes and even the Doll's House isn't even redeemable completely. I do really love the serial killer convention idea. But the idea of him being out before Morpheus is captured was the only thing I really rubbed up on. I was like, well, how did he escape? It's he's meant to be the most dangerous of the nightmares. So how would they let that happen? But whatever. If that's the biggest complaint about the show, then really it's more me bringing in what I know from outside of this to be that's a problem. Sorry if those two thoughts seem completely disjointed, because they still haven't finished the highway yet, and I pause it when I go over the grooved roads, because it's not pleasant on the eardrums when you're doing that. I did record a review of Prey last night, but I forgot to upload it when I went to bed last night. What else was there? I mean, it is exactly what anyone who has been asking for a Sandman show could have wanted. Like, it is doing exactly what people have been asking for, which is a faithful adaptation of the comic The Sandman, and that's a rarity today. Like, look at any other, like, comic book to screen adaptation. I mean, besides Paper Girls, like, I don't think there is much, you know, in terms of direct adaptation from screen to from page to screen in that way. This has got to be one of the most faithful adaptations. I mean, if you are removing the DC characters, I think there's a legitimate reason why the DC characters don't need to be there. And the whole show runs very well without them, because they're in small supporting roles. I feel like there was a reference to something that's like, oh, that's loosely tied to DC, besides the Sandman JSA member. Who the fuck was it? I feel like there was definitely one that I was like, oh, that's cool. But I would like to see the show come back for a second season. Because once we get into the next season, we get into the really... If this is arcs 1 and 2, season 3 and 4, we're going to get into the closure of Hell and the banquet, and the dealing between all the gods trying to get control of Hell. Because Lucifer's like, fuck this, I'm out. And gives the keys of Hell to... What's it called? Gives the keys of Hell to Morpheus and is like, this is yours now, congratulations, have fun, fuck off. And that would be great, I think, if they did that. And they did that proper. Because I think that in between it's not a great... Because that's the thing, too. I was like, why did they cut it off here? And I understand why. It's because they want to keep all of the Africa stuff. I don't want to say they want to keep it contained to one season, but I don't think they want people to have to remember the introduction of Morpheus, you know, as the ruler of the dream in Africa, during that period, and falling in love with, I forgot the character's name. They introduced the character briefly when he's going through Hell with Patton Oswalt, but I think the introduction of that, and like the true deep dive of that in the same season, where they tell the whole backstory and all of that, makes a lot of sense. Especially over, like, you know, doing it halfway in one season, like telling the story in one season and then, you know, doing the rest in the next. But on that note, we will wrap up there for today. If you have not yet watched Sandman, it's available on Netflix with your subscription, and it is a long watch. I think that's my only complaint. Again, not the show's fault, but they should not have released it as a binge. They should have done it weekly, and I can't. It's just personal preference. I can't stand the binge. But we'll wrap up there for today. And until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.